Hi, everyone. Welcome to 3F's Fall Webinar Series. I'm Jenny Hom-Franzen, the 3F's Executive Director. Before I turn things over to our speakers, I wanted to share a little bit about 3F. I know some of you have attended our events, gone to our summit, attended past webinars, but others may be new. Regardless, we're so happy you're here today. So 3F is a leading resource when it comes to Asian advertising, Asian marketing, and the power of the Asian American consumer. You can find out more about us, of course, on our website, 3af.org, or follow us on Facebook or on LinkedIn. And also, I want to make sure that you all opt in for our email news. And lastly, I encourage you to attend our 3F Asian Marketing Summit. It's the largest national conference focusing on the Asian consumer, and it's always in May during Heritage Month. We will be announcing our 2025 dates and the location later this fall. Also, be sure to check out our website for other topics in our fall webinar series. We have some great ones lined up through November. Our next topic is the adaptation and integration of marketing strategies in Taiwan's unique marketing environment, and that's set for September 18th. A bit of housekeeping. We are recording today's session. Also wanted to remind you that we will post the link later on our website if you want to listen to it again. And also we will be providing the deck as well. In terms of questions, we do have time for Q&A, so feel free to put those in the chat box and we'll get to as many as we can. And now I'd like to introduce one of our speakers. Ron Wong is the president and CEO of Imprenta Communications Group, an award-winning marketing communications and political campaign agency specializing in today's marketing consumers and communities. He and Corey Wong launched Emerge Media, a technology media company, in May of this year, and Ron is president and CEO of Emerge Media. I also have to mention, Emerge Media is also a member of 3F. So please welcome Ron Wong. Ron, over to you.
Hi, thank you, Jeannie. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and to address all of you and thank all of you for taking the time and hopefully being active in 3AF, this incredible organization that brings people within our niche in the Asian American market together. And so we're so happy to be here to just talk a little bit about some of the challenges and opportunities that we share in the marketplace and also within the niche of the Asian American market and what the opportunities are. So first slide is, this is the things we're going to cover in the first couple Corey, move the slide, please. The first couple of ones are things that most of you already know, but I think it's important to talk about is that we are a large, growing, and lucrative market. The media landscape, and then number three, the different ways we are invisible, and then programmatic media buying and advertising opportunities, and then how we can become visible and not be invisible in America. So again, on the first issue is we are a large and growing and lucrative market. So overall, we are 7% of the nation's population. We're the third largest and fastest growing demographic in America. I mean, a lot of people think the Latinos are the fast growing, but actually Asian Pacific Islanders are. Our population in the last 20 years has doubled, and by 2060, we'll surpass 46 million. By 2065, which seems like a long time off, but in reality is not, we will be the largest ethnic group in America. So the growth has been substantial, the growth has been rapid, and also the growth has been diverse, meaning different countries within the Asia Pacific and Islander region. Okay. So with that said, again, here's how we stack up against other communities. You can see African American, Asians, and Latinos. They have a high growth rate. African Americans are relatively flat. And Asian Americans, as well as Latinos, are growing at a fairly rapid rate. So the good thing about marketing and Target Us is that we congregate in a few key states. California, New York, and Texas. And 57% of our market, if you add California, Hawaii and Washington, that's 57% of all Asian Americans are in those states. So from a media perspective, that's where most of the outlets are. That's where the opportunities are. However, we are seeing rapid growth in the Sun Belt, everything from Texas to Georgia, going along those lines, largely in the South Asian community, the Vietnamese community, and so forth and so on. Minnesota has a lot of Hmongs. So we do see growth all over the country. But right now, we're congregated in California, Hawaii, and Washington, New York, and Texas. Okay. So another interesting point, and again, I know all of you know most of this information, and we have a really comprehensive fact pack that we could share or distribute more information. But we are the highest income in America even over the Anglo community. So we have the highest income with the median income of $108,000 a year. That's 41% higher than the median income. So our community has the biggest spending power, has the biggest household income. So compared to, and this chart shows how we compare next to other communities that seem to get a lot more attention. We're substantially more than in terms of growth. We're seeing growth at the top and also, unfortunately, at the bottom end of the spectrum for Asian Americans. Okay. So again, when you look at the total buying power, it's 1.3 trillion in 2002. By next year, it'll be 1.8 trillion. And our buying power is surpassing even our population growth. Again, so that's because we have some incredible amount of wealth within our community. Okay. So when we look at the media landscape, it mirrors what we're talking about in terms of where the key population growth centers are. California, obviously, being the largest in terms of media outlets, particularly incredibly diverse here in California, where there's Chinese, Vietnamese, Filipino, every single AAPI subgroup under the diaspora, under the umbrella of AAPI, is in California. But when you move to the other parts of the country, they also mirror the demographic. There's a lot of South Asian publications through the Sun Belt in Texas. New York is more traditional with a lot of Chinese. So, you know, there are many, many outlets. In fact, if you go to the next slide, there's an overabundance of outlets, because what has happened is when a largely immigrant community comes to America, they're entrepreneurial and they create new businesses. So there's actually an overabundance when you compare to other communities in terms of all the different kind of publications that have grown out of our community. And this just shows that there's, you know, this is within America, 97 Korean, 74, 61 Chinese. So there's many, many mom and pops. There's many, many larger ones. So it really spans the gamut of the community. In fact, there's actually many, many publications fighting for the same market. Okay. So an important piece of this, obviously, as we move forward, is digital. So most of the API outlets now have digital offerings where we really are reaching people through their phones, through different apps, through being on the web. So digital is growing compared to other communities. And also, we see not necessarily a decline in the other mediums, but just the outpacing of digital. And that is also seen in the amount of money being spent within the community. That's a quick overview of the demographics. And I think most of you know what I've touched upon on the first two points that I'm trying to make. And the real takeaway that we want to talk about is, okay, we are a large and growing part of the population. We're the fastest growing. We have huge economic buying power, but yet we remain, in many people's eyes, invisible. And when we measure that in how we're perceived, how many people know, how many people pay attention, I know all of us do as people who are in the market and interested in the market, but largely America, in terms of representation in entertainment, media, so forth and so on. While that is growing exponentially in the last 5 years, before that it was virtually nil. Only 6% of 44% of Americans can't name a famous living Asian American. So Bruce Lee comes up really, really high. He's, as you know, Bruce Lee's not been active. He's been deceased since the early 70s. Kamala Harris running as president, that makes a big, huge opportunity for us. However, she's generally perceived as African American, although I know she touts her South Asian roots as well. But when it comes to TV shows, when it comes to actors, when it comes to role models, we're virtually invisible when it comes to media portrayals. Um, and in the political dynamic, we are largely underrepresented. This is an area that I spent a lot of my adult life working in, trying to get representations. And I can say, even here in California, our growth has been incredible at the local level, at the school board, city council, and even the state legislature, which had zero Asian Americans in the 80s, now has 12, going on 13 members of the state legislature. But even with our growth, we are still largely underrepresented in elected office and in leadership roles, notwithstanding, again, our vice president running for president. But generally speaking, there's only been one governor outside of California, Gary Locke, South Asian down in Georgia. So at the US Senate, aside from Hawaii, there are very, very few Asian American representation. And this includes states where there's rapid growth. So, in that way, we're invisible as well. And this is really telling. For every dollar spent on ethnic media in America, meaning media targeting Latinos, African Americans, Asian Americans, and Pacific Islanders, only 5 cents is spent targeting the ethnic market. And of that 5 cents, 2.5 cents is spent on Latinos and 1.5 on African Americans. So if you add that number up, that equals 5 cents. So statistically, Asian Americans are only 0.15 of the spend of dollars that are targeting Asian Americans. So that's less than 2 cents. It's 0.1 cent. It's much, it's virtually zero. So despite being 7% of the population, despite having large amounts of spending power, people are not spending within our niche. So that means that has dramatic impact throughout the market, that so little money is being spent here. Again, here's just another way to look at it. We are 26.5 million people, and again, on track to be the largest ethnic group, but our media spend is only 0.15. Okay.
Yeah.
So go ahead, Corey. So I'm going to turn this over to Corey, but I want to make one last point about us being invisible. That has ramifications in terms of the type of ads that our publications are seeing, who's spending on them. So if you open up your typical publication and you look at the ads, they're largely dominated by attorneys, maybe some insurance agents, and ethnic restaurants. So that means these publications are surviving on very, very few dollars. That's why many of them may go under unless something is done to address how much is being spent. There are very few ads from mainstream companies. There may be some government ads, there may be some car ads and alcohol ads, but beyond that, you don't see the wide breadth of advertising from major brands within our ethnic publications. So I want to turn this over to Corey, who's going to talk a little about programmatic and the opportunities of there within advertising. But before I turn over to Corey, I want to just introduce him really quickly. Corey is my partner in this endeavor. He comes from a large publisher, a company that was formerly Demand Media, that has, their eyeballs are about 23% of the American population, owns a lot of major brands like Live Strong and fitness brands and so forth and so on. In the wellness center. So they own pretty much the marketplace in the wellness in America. So Corey was a vice president there, spent the last 15 years in programmatic advertising, representing publishers, helping them monetize their digital advertising, make more money for them, how they could be more efficient, and how they could utilize technology. So, in talking to Corey over the last decade, we've kicked around the idea that let's drill down heavily and see what the opportunities are within API, the API market on digital and programmatic media buying. Corey?
Yep. Thank you for that intro, Ron. What Ron said earlier in the presentation, a lot of talk about, things moving digital, right? A big part of the digital monetization ecosystem is programmatic advertising. So you hear programmatic advertising, this might be the first time you've heard of it. Don't be scared. It's really simple. It's essentially using data and technology to facilitate the buying and selling of digital media. This means no manual IOs and paperwork. Everything is automated and simplified and on demand. And what programmatic has been I think the first programmatic ad was launched in 1994. So it's been around the block, but it didn't really take off until the last decade when a lot of the sort of mainstream publishers were using programmatic advertising to fill their excess and unsold inventory. Google has been a big player in the space for years, and now programmatic advertising is a fundamental part of every digital media company. In fact, there might be a lot of mainstream companies out there that you may or may not know are almost nearly 100% programmatic, right? Moving down to sort of the programmatic advertising as it relates to Asian American media, kind of if I had to give it a scorecard where we're at today, in a nutshell, it's not as strong as it can be, if I have to be really honest, right? In doing the research, we noticed that a lot of Asian American media publishers are not participating or even fully utilizing programmatic advertising, right? That leads to limited adoption of programmatic advertising, which leads to less visibility and less revenue for the publisher, which therefore leads to underrepresentation of programmatic advertising opportunities, which ultimately leads to underutilization from brands and advertisers to advertise within the Asian American community, right? So you kind of have this like chicken and the egg, potentially negative kind of flywheel. By not participating in programmatic, Asian American media companies are affected. The advertisers can't effectively reach us, making us invisible digitally, despite having a large footprint of publications. And then moving it back to Ron.
So what we've done is, I think the challenge is that when you look, why are our mainstream advertisers spending so little within our marketplace? Well, one, it's a complex market. It's not one language, it's not one demographic, it's many, right? And also, the largest API populations are Chinese and Filipino, but beyond that, there are many Vietnamese, Hmong, Korean, everything within South Asia, Pakistan, India, all of those things fall under the API umbrella. There are many outlets, all with different languages, all with different cultures, all with different publications. It's very difficult to figure that out from an advertiser's point of view, or even a mainstream media buyer's point of view. So it's very complex. And because it's not just one market, it's very diffused. And the golden rule of digital advertising or any kind of advertising is you want to advertise where the population is, where the scale is, right? But because it's so diverse and spread out throughout the country, although it's in key states, it's also growing in others, and it's diverse. So if I want to reach Vietnamese, it's a very small target of people. It might not be worth my time because there's not enough of them within a specific segment of the market. So it's complex, it's diverse, and it's hard to reach because one, programmatic makes it easier to reach, but imagine a mainstream advertiser having to call through the hundreds of publications that are largely, many of them mom and pop publications, that are not ready or equipped or easily, I've had one advertiser or one media consultant tell me he would call these publications and almost offer to give them money, but they weren't equipped to deal with it. And it was very difficult to get things like rate sheets, so forth and so on. So it just makes it very, very difficult for people to understand the market. So what they say is, well, it's not worth it. We won't spend there. The other thing they'll say is, well, we'll reach Ron Wong and Corey Wong through other means. We'll reach them on LA Times, the San Francisco Chronicle, New York Times, CNN, ESPN. However, they may reach us there, but there's a huge part of the market, as you know, and as I laid out in the front end, that are largely more recent immigrants that are reading Tsingtao, are reading Korea Times, are reading Nui so they're reading those language publications, which are not easily to access for mainstream advertisers. So their claim is that it's difficult. So we're trying to make it easier for them to do that by adding in not only programmatic, but going to these publications and, in a sense, pre-doing the buy. We've already negotiated rates with them. We've already negotiated the scale. So that's where Emerge Media comes in. And by doing this, the brands can't say that this is difficult because we've made it easier. And we also enrich the outlets or the publishers because we're bringing them into the programmatic sense. We're also giving them more visibility to the major brands. So that's where our company Emerge comes in to make it easier for brands to connect, to make it more profitable for the outlets. And we can facilitate that through the technology that we have. So what needs to happen? As we mentioned at the front end, if I didn't, and Bonnie mentioned this, it's like organizations like 3AF play a critical role and have been highly successful. And the need for them is to bring attention to our AAPI market. So working together, advocating, and touting our success stories, how we're working together, what the opportunities are. And we need the resources and empowering our own voice within our market. And I know there's a huge appetite to do that. We want to be a resource and help create an atmosphere where, hey, if we're 7% of the market and get 0.15 of the media spend, if we increase that to 1.5, that would be tenfold, but hardly enough to match our buying power and our population. So I think we have a little work ahead of us, but we have organizations like 3F, we have all of you who've tuned in, who can make the case why it's worth spending in this market and how we've helped to make it a little bit easier. So with that, I think we have a fair amount of time for questions.
Great. Thank you, Ron and Corey. First of all, Ron, just thank you for that shout out to 3AF. You're right. We have been working tirelessly 20 plus years to elevate the power of the Asian American consumer. And I want to thank our members, media and friends and agencies. I see a lot of their names here. So thank you for helping us in this journey. We want to be more visible, and we can do that, I think, through all of our collective efforts. So I'll open the floor for questions. If you can please put them in the Q&A box. It's on the lower portion of your screen. I think we have one question. I think, Ron, this is for you. How are you defining AAPI, specifically what countries and ethnicities?
It's fairly broad, but Asian Americans, right? Chinese, East Asians, I guess to sum it up, East Asians and South Asians, and also including Southeast Asians, if you want to make that distinction. But we see that distinction coming more into play where people make a difference with East Asians being the Chinese, Koreans, and Japanese, South Asians being Indians and Pakistanis, and then Southeast Asians, Filipino, Vietnamese, Laos, Cambodia, that whole region, and the Pacific Island, Samoa, Guam, and all of that. But that's the generally defined terms. It can go as far as, which we're not including in terms of media, We're not including parts of the Middle East that may concern themselves Asian or Armenia and things like that. But, generally East, Southeast, and South Asians.
Super. Okay, another question. Can you identify and target AAPI audiences' language preferences? I guess that means through your programmatic.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's our value add. Like if you want to target, because we've gone out to all the publications with our technology, and segregating is a big part of what we do. So targeting each of those subsections.
Okay. Here's another question. Are there strong advocates for you in the mainstream media?
I think Bonnie can even answer that.
Maybe I'll answer that one. I will say that, as 3F, we always try to get publicity, do a PR campaign, let people know about our summit. But oftentimes, sadly, it falls on deaf ears on mainstream media. For whatever reason, they don't think we're big enough of a news story. Our Asian media friends, of course, cover us and really help us to publicize things. But I wish there were more advocates in mainstream media for us. And Ron, would you agree to that?
I would definitely agree. And I know Bonnie and I have talked extensively in this, we've talked heavily about this with Jeannie, before this call, during, and to the run up. Although it is hugely challenging, we have made incredible strides within the last decade. If you look at Hollywood, for example, Crazy Rich Asians, not everyone agrees with the theme, but at least we're seeing more portraits. We see Sammo Hung, the one who was in the Marvel. He was Ken's adversary in the Barbie movie. So we do see Asians. I think Hollywood is a big impetus for where the media is going, right? So because they give voice, they create influencers, they create followers, and you see much more within the last years organizations like Gold House, Asian American Cape in entertainment, similar to this organization that Jeannie runs. And the work that she's done, but they're advocacy organizations similar to 3AF trying to advocate for them in Hollywood. They did not exist 5 years ago, right? And I think when Crazy Rich Asians came out, that's when they kind of galvanized. And then also when Fresh Off the Boat went off the air, they started to say we need more, not just one and done. And I think that's what's happening through 3AF. And again, we need to show that we are a viable market, and that we're not diffused, that we do have spending power, and that you're not going to get us necessarily through the mainstream media.
Yeah, if I could add to that, Ron, 3AF, as I said, we work with a lot of the major industry associations to make sure that there's Asian content in the agendas and the programs and the diversity conferences. And I feel like we've had some super successes recently. We had some wonderful corporate marketers join us. They put a stake in the ground. Yes, we believe the Asian market is important. Yes, we want to invest. Yes, we need to find out more and reach this segment. So we just welcome others to join us in this brand journey. Okay, another question. Sorry. Do you see different types of challenges or necessary approaches in local media markets as opposed to national mainstream media?
Yes, right. Because I think and I don't know how many of you are in California. I assume many of you are. But everything is local, even how the the language differences from different parts of the country and even different parts of the state could be different, the nuance to that. So that's a difficulty. But I think, and that one slide that I was trying to explain how there is an explosion of publications, that you have to kind of really understand the market to know which ones are the ones that are the most credible, are the ones that have the most readership. Because I'll just give a real life example. A friend of mine, and many of you in LA may know her, On Do, because she now is the editor at the LA Times. Her family created Nui Viet, which is a Vietnamese newspaper. They were the first and they opened up their shop in a cul-de-sac in Westminster. And if you drive in that cul-de-sac, you will see 12 other Vietnamese publications. So just like any other immigrant group that's entrepreneurial, APIs, when they come here, they want to start businesses. And when they see success, they all jump into that market. So that leads to a lot of competition and spreading out the audience. And then it also leads to confusion. Like, okay, I don't want to advertise in all 12, but I don't know which ones are the most credible. And I don't know which ones have the most reach, because many times when you're dealing with smaller publications, they may have, because they're trying to carve out their niche, they may have certain biases in terms of their publication that you may not know about because you're just not in the market. So I think navigating locally the credibility of some of the outlets, and then also the audience, because this is because of the immigration that is driving the growth, that makes this very, very dynamic, right? So you can't just set it and be done. And I'll just use an example of where I come from as a Chinese American. I'm third generation, Corey second. We grew up in San Gabriel Valley, but now, when we were growing up, you see the immigration from Taiwan. So that means, what does that mean? Taiwan publications. And then you see the immigration from Hong Kong. So what does that mean? Hong Kong publications and the dialect. And now we see changes coming from, or population growth coming from mainland China. So that means new publications and different cultural and also language subtle differences. So that's just happened within LA County in the last 20 years. So those kind of differences are something that need to be navigated.
Yeah, and Ron, if I could just add to that, I just want to reiterate to all our friends, and you probably all know this, but 3F is the leading resource for everyone in Asian advertising, Asian marketing, and the power of the Asian consumer. So if you have questions about the Asian segment, Asian media, feel free to reach out to us, because we can work with you, introduce you to our member agencies, member media, to help you to make sure you reach the targeted Asian consumer segment. Okay, I see two more questions. You've talked about how tough it can be to scale campaigns for the AAPI community because there are so many different subgroups, languages, and cultures. How does Emerge Media help advertisers cut through all that complexity and still run campaigns that are both effective and culturally relevant?
Corey, you could take some of this, but I'll just start off by saying, I think we solved the scale problem by kind of going out and doing the buy already, because we spent the last year going out to all the publications, talking to them. And we've also talked to a lot of media buyers, mainstream media buyers, who have said that it's very difficult getting rate sheets. It's very difficult getting, if you're not speaking the same language, because we have most of the Asian languages covered within our staff. And we also have done a lot of media buying through my other company. We had those relationships, so we were able to go out to those publications and talk to them already and do the buy, so that or negotiate the rates prior to. So that makes it easier to scale, because we've already reached out to many of the publications across the country. So. And then the technology makes it easier to target by language. So we could just hit a button and say we want to hit the Vietnamese publication and the publications. So that's how we've made it easier.
Yeah. And I think to add to that point too, is like we've done the work. We understand the culture. We are the culture, and we're helping facilitate us being visible, right? And I think that's what it is. It's TLC, right? It's tender love and care, with working with these publishers and understanding what it is, right? Hey, the difference between simplified Chinese, traditional Chinese, all these little nuances that we've done the homework for, that makes us different from the rest of the pack.
Okay, a reminder to continue to type your questions into the Q&A box. I see a couple more. For Corey, we find that navigating to establish the programmatic. Do you have tools how to do that? We are television, traditional broadcast, over-the-air program.
Yeah, no, we definitely have tools, and more importantly, you have like the staff over at Emerge Media I think what makes us kind of different is that we are going to consult with you, right? So in addition to the technology layer, really helping you understand like, why this is a thing and really helping you get ahead of trends and issues as the digital landscape continually evolves, right? You know, because it's constantly changing, right? Whether you're hearing Google's deprecating cookies, identity solutions, all these other things, right? So there's a whole lot of what I'm trying to say is this, there's just a lot of things to learn about programmatic. We are your one-stop shop for technology, as well as also, you know, education to help you navigate through programmatic.
Okay. Another question. What are the average CPMs you are looking at for exposure to consolidated AAPI audiences?
Yeah, so that's I'll take this one. That's kind of a loaded question, right? Because there's so many factors that goes into what an advertiser from a programmatic perspective will kind of pay you, right? And so I would say, you know, I can't really give you a CPM, but I can tell you how to best optimize. And through our technology and through our consulting, we're able to kind of tell you, hey, here's what we think is going to be the best outcome for your content, right? And basically how your user uses your pages, right? So I can't really give you an average CPM, but I can tell you that there is a deep understanding in the programmatic world on how to optimize these things, and that's what we're here to help navigate.
Okay, another great question. And Ron, I think this one's for you. Could Asians in Congress help heighten awareness of the market potential and needs? I see you smiling already. How? Question mark. A hearing? Question mark.
Well, I'm glad that question came up because I didn't want to talk about that because I kind of glossed over our political underrepresentation, and I've spent pretty much my whole life in politics. So let's just start in California because I think Congress is a lot to bite off, and I'm sure Judy Chu would be a huge advocate for this because her and I have had different conversations about representation. But we actually have a bill drafted for California. And we've talked to the chair of the AAPI legislative caucus because obviously in California, there's no quotas, there's no, set aside, but the legislature does have power to audit, to ask questions. So when I mentioned that we're only 0.15 of the spend, if you look at how much California is spending on media and also advertising campaigns, that are directly related to APIs and of course the whole population because they're spending on campaigns like Covered California, like how to fight financial fraud during the pandemic, how to get your vaccination. So we have a bill drafted actually that we're going to be ready to have authors sign on in California, which asks the state agencies to disclose the amount being spent within the key demographics. And there is a similar bill that was passed in California that took a look at corporate boards to put pressure on companies to more diversify. So we do have a draft piece of legislation. And, I know we can't address, potentially through DEI, you could address corporations, but I think just asking the question to government and what's under their control, because they have a responsibility, an explicit responsibility to the populations within their states and the country. How much is being spent? Shouldn't some money be spent on APIs regarding vaccinations or regarding heat stroke, all of the things that the state spends money to advertise on? So that's a great question. Thank you.
Yeah. So Ron, if someone were interested in following up with you, they could just reach out to you directly on some of these political issues. I will say that 3F as a nonprofit, we're, nonpartisan, so we don't really cross over into the political world. And I know that's your expertise. Is that right? If they want to follow up with you?
Oh, absolutely.
Find out more about this bill, for example.
Yeah. And we'll keep, definitely.
Yeah,
I
keep
think
us posted. Keep me posted for sure. Yeah.
We might ask you to come up and testify if it gets to that. But I think there would be support for this bill. I mean, the caucus seems to be excited about it.
Okay,
Yeah.
super. I see another question. How do you see the trend of reforming media platforms such as streaming services affecting the representation and visibility of AAPI communities? Are there specific examples of positive or negative impacts you've observed? streaming services?
That's a great question. Corey, do you want to take the first bite at that?
Yeah, no. I would say it's been great, right? And I think it's another way, instead of just, putting out movies like the Crazy Rich Asians, right? You now have access, in real time, right? If Netflix puts out a new, say, like a K-drama, right? Or something affiliated with that. And so I think it's been great for visibility. And I think it's just a start, right? It's just surface level stuff, and it's great for representation, but we still have a lot of work to do, right? That's one aspect, right? So I think it's great, but I think there's more work to do. Yeah.
I think what drives the platforms is technology, right? And all of that is a good thing because it's always going to be about how do we speak directly to that consumer, or how do we speak directly to that constituent, right? So when we have more technology that allows us to better target and understand, that means the end message to the user will be better on different platforms, on different targeting, on different cultural nuances. But we just have to be able to take advantage of not only the technology, but then how that impacts the different platforms. So smaller, more segregated message obviously are going to resonate more, and they're going to have a better outcome.
Okay, super. I see another question. It's about programmatic. He says that programmatic is at least 15 years old. Google is king. Most publishers probably already have Google. What is that? What can you do that Google can't?
Yeah, and that's the problem. It's only Google, right? And so I think that's essentially kind of how programmatic has shifted, right? Like, hey, you're right, Google is the king. And they're doing amazing things, and have done a lot of great work for kind of creating the marketplace and making it more prominent, right? But what happens next is there's a whole other world outside of Google that contribute to the programmatic ecosystem, right? And I think that's sort of like what is sort of the issue with kind of the mystery around programmatic advertising, is that there's a whole lot of education that still needs to be done, right? And so you have a whole host of other sort of like Google competitors or associates that also want to buy into your inventory, right? In addition to that, too, so basically, taking a step back, you have Google as your base. You bring in other partners too to help have Google compete dynamically to drive higher CPMs, right? If you just have Google, Google can cherry pick your audience all day. And myself as a publisher in the past have a really good understanding of that, right? And so you need to bring in other outside demand to put pressure to maximize and optimize and fully utilize programmatic to its fullest potential, right? I would say what we can do is we can bring that demand, we can bring that technology to help you sort of improve your CPMs. Not only that, we can also help you dynamically place ads or insert ads where we think there's an opportunity, right? Whether you have you want dynamic ad insertion, you want certain smart refreshes, right? We increase the opportunities and revenue potential for your advertising. That's kind of what we do a little bit differently, or what we do differently to help you make the most money as possible.
Yeah, and I think education starts even within our own community, and for Corey and I, it just started with between us, right? Because Corey's perspective, coming from a mainstream advertiser or a mainstream publisher, was that everyone understands programmatic and everyone is optimizing it to some degree. I could help you optimize more. So just using that as we approached our market, I said, well, Corey, you'll be a little bit surprised what the sophistication level is within our own community. But understanding the resources of a lot of these publications, they are very small shops, right? So, and I think, Corey, you can, this is a presumption, but you can directly address this. I think you're under the assumption that everyone is using to some degree programmatic. But I think what you found out in the last year is that some look at digital advertising as simply selling directly through whatever they're selling or an add-on to their print buy, and are not using programmatic at all. And again, I think we estimate that 40 to 50% of all the publications are not even utilizing programmatic, period. Right. So Corey, you want to elaborate on some of your experience with that?
Yeah, no. Yeah, it just hasn't really been a kind of priority. And I just, coming from wearing my optimization hat, right? I'm like, I just see so much potential, right? Um, to increase CPMs because, in order to maximize and fully optimize your, let's call it an ad stack, you have to do a lot of things to send the right signals to the advertisers. Because at the end of the day, it's data and technology, right? You don't communicate with an advertiser. You just, through your technology and your data, you communicate with the advertiser and they bid on the inventory, right? So there are a lot more things that can be done. And a lot of times, because how scary it might sound, some publishers are leaving money on the table. And that's kind of what we're here to kind of help uncover and help investigate and just really helping the community become more visible and contribute.
And that's why you joined 3AF, right?
That's why I joined 3AF. That's why we joined 3AF.
Okay, so with that, I'm going to wrap up. We're out of time. I want to thank our subject matter experts, Ron Wong and Corey Wong, for their expertise today. I want to thank all of our friends on the call as well for joining. Just to wrap up, we're not invisible, right? We are working really hard to be visible, and we need all of you to join us. And so help 3AF, help our member agencies, our media, to make sure that brands see the opportunity in reaching Asian Americans. So just another reminder, our next webinar is September 18th. You can go to our website and sign up and register, and we'll hope to see you there. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.